Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Billy Napier, the Florida Gators, have not been extremely aggressive the last 2 weeks in the transfer portal. Quite frankly, I didn't think they needed to be that aggressive, but they are going after really two of the top targets available in this spring transfer portal window. Later last week, we talked about Jason Zandamela really being a good fit for the Florida Gators. That sounds like it went really well. We might be breaking down a commitment relatively soon from Jason Zandamela. I want to talk about another player that you're starting to hear some buzz around the Florida Gators, and that's former Arizona State wide receiver Elijah Badger. Now, Florida fans, we've talked extensively about different positions we would like to see the Florida Gators go after in the transfer portal. Many of y'all, including myself, were kind of banging the table that they could use one more veteran wide receiver with proven production at the Power 5 level. Elijah Badger checks all of those boxes that we just listed. Want to do two different things. One, talk about Elijah Badger, talk about what he could bring to this Florida Gators offense. More importantly, want to have a conversation regarding what this Florida wide receiver room is going to look like in 2024. It's a wide receiver room that maybe doesn't have a ton of returning production, really only Trey Wilson. You lose Ricky Pearsall, went first round in the NFL draft, but a lot of young talent that I know a lot of Florida Gator fans are excited about. Want to talk about how Elijah Badger might fit into that wide receiver room. Before we get into it, as always, just want to say thank you to you guys, the Florida Gator fans. The amount of support y'all have been showing the boys, it has been amazing. One, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, would love to get some feedback from you guys because I know we kind of differ in opinions on what this Florida wide receiver room is going to look like and how good it's going to be. Would love to hear what you guys are thinking in the comment section. And without further ado, let's get into it. Now, I want to start with Elijah Badger first, a wide receiver that next to Keandre Lambert-Smith, probably one of, if not my favorite wide receiver that was available in the portal. This is a guy that at Arizona State the last 2 years, it was ugly from an offensive quarterback perspective. When good things were happening for this Arizona State program, it was Elijah Badger having the football in his hands. You take a look at some of the numbers from the last 2 years, over 1,500 yards, 18 touchdowns the last 2 seasons at Arizona State. You dive into the 2023 numbers a little bit more. A couple of things that you really like. One, 2 drops all year on 99 targets. He had about twice as many targets as the next pass catcher for Arizona State. That kind of gives you a picture of how reliant this Arizona State offense was on Elijah Badger, a guy that probably could have gone to the NFL draft had he wanted to. The numbers that I really like, you take a look at what Billy Napier wants to do in this passing attack. You look how they use a guy like Trey Wilson. They want to get the football to their playmakers in space, let them cook after the catch. Elijah Badger, that really is his specialty. You take a look at over 700 receiving yards in 2023, 550 of those yards came after the catch. His missed tackles forced number, 26 missed tackles forced. That is better than some running backs at the FBS level. You are talking about at 6'2", almost 200 pounds, a load to bring down. He's got nice long speed. And I know a lot of Florida fans have been saying we want a wide receiver that can work vertically as well. Elijah Badger can do that as well. I think his calling card as a wide receiver is somebody that is really good after the catch, working those short intermediate route trees, but a guy that with the long speed in the frame that he has can certainly work vertically down the field, plays all over the field, right? 30% of the snaps in the slot, the other 70 as a boundary receiver. This is a weapon that kind of seamlessly could get injected to this Florida Gators offense. And when you take a look at the pass catching unit for the Florida Gators, and I think there's a lot of reason to be excited about what this unit's going to be in 2024. One, Graham Mertz, in my mind, one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC. I don't think there's any way around it. I think you have a much improved offensive line. You look at this wide receiver room and say, all right, we know we have a Trey Wilson. He is one of the premier playmakers, not only in the SEC, but in college football. You have a guy in Tremere Dike who, coming over from Wisconsin, he averages over 16 yards per catch. Him and Graham Mertz have that chemistry. If you read the spring practice notes, that was a quarterback wide receiver combination that you heard a lot of during spring ball. But then you have some other guys that you're kind of waiting to break out, right? A guy like Andy Jean or Aiden Mizell, two wide receivers that we were extremely excited for going into their freshman year, didn't have as much opportunity and quite frankly weren't as good as Trey Wilson was his true freshman year. But those are still two guys that just because Trey Wilson made it work as a true freshman doesn't mean Andy Jean and Aiden Mizell are bad players. These guys could be absolute dudes in 2024. But how you look at this wide receiver room and say, you have guys that you know what you're going to get, right? Khalil Jackson, Shamir DK, Trey Wilson, you know those guys are really solid football players. Trey Wilson being an extremely special football player. But you also have some guys that I think could be difference makers for this Florida Gators offense in 2024 that you don't necessarily know what you have, right? Andy Jean, Aiden Mizell. I'd throw in a guy like Tank Hawkins, who, again, going to be one of the faster players in all of college football. The reason why I like Elijah Badger so much to this Florida Gators offense is you probably want one more proven production body in that room, right? Because you got Trey Wilson, you got Shamir DK. After that, it's not a ton of proven commodities in that wide receiver room. I think Elijah Badger kind of rounds out three wide receivers in Trey Wilson, Shamir DK, and now Elijah, or I should say Trey Wilson, Shamir DK, and Elijah Badger. That would be three wide receivers that you know what you have heading into 2024. I think this would be a massive get for the Florida Gators. Not only really good football player Elijah Badger is, but I think a really good fit in terms of what Florida wants to do on the offensive side of the football. They made it clear. They went after Justice Ross Simmons from Colorado State. He ends up going to Syracuse. They want a wide receiver in this portal window. I think Elijah Badger, probably the last really good wide receiver, probably the last difference maker that's still on the board. Really interested to see if anything comes about. We'll talk Jason Zandamela if and when it does happen. Appreciate you guys rocking with it again. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.